Welcome to The Passion Pod with your host, Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation.
Welcome back, friends. Today we're chilling in Studio P, aka my dining room with one of the area's most loved voices that isn't my own. Just kidding, my ego's not that big. Our guest today just ran his first half marathon, which I'm jealous because we talked about it at the bar recently, but he's not known for that. He's known for something else. His band is a staple in the area and has performed all over the place, including the upcoming Blue Ox Festival. Welcome to the show, Soren Staff from Them Coulee Boys.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Dude,
Appreciate
thanks for
it.
coming to my house.
Yeah, it's sick here. I'm really enjoying the amount of plants. I'm very, very jealous of that.
Dude, I really feel like the air quality's better. Like it's fresh. You know what I'm talking about?
I mean, I'm coming from a bachelor pad, which I'm sure the air quality is not the way it should be anyway. But yeah, there's a marked difference here and there.
Yeah, I think because my life is so going just like yours, I don't get to relax very much, that I need to be very intentional about making my life as relaxing in whatever ways that I can. So I try to have my space be as calming as possible because I'm just always running, doing all kinds of stuff. So who are you and what are you passionate about?
My name is Soren Staff, and I'm passionate about making music that can change people's perceptions and lives.
Wow. Okay. Change them how?
I just want, through my music, to be able to get people more in tune with themselves, more in tune with the people around them. I make things that are sincere and intentional. And if I could inspire that out of others, sincerity and intentionality, that's something I would really love to do.
That's one of the beautiful things with things like Blue Ox, but bluegrass music, more so than a lot of other genres, is it is more about community, and it's a very uplifting, happy. It's not a whole lot of negative, versus a lot of times I listen to a lot of hip hop music, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cockiness and arrogance, and that's kind of part of it, and it doesn't really bring people together. But the first festival I've ever been to was Blue Ox last year, which is crazy because I'm turning 32 next week. So made it. I didn't go to any in my 20s or anything, and then I got a random DM in my DM requests out of nowhere, and I was I looked at it, and it was from someone, I can't remember his name now. I feel like a jerk. He's the coolest, but anyways, he sent me a
free
DM.
Tickets.
Yeah, well, he basically was hey, I moved to the area recently, discovered your shop and your show, and I really love what you're doing. I bought these Blue Ox tickets, but for work reasons or for whatever, I can't go. And you're the first person to come to mind for me to give them away to if you would like them. And I was yeah, I sure. I guess. Why not? Yeah. So I went, I couldn't go one of the days, but I went the Saturday. And I was dude, this is such a cool thing. I didn't understand what it really was. So now I'm really excited because I'm going to be working with Blue Ox this year to interview a bunch of the performers and stuff and kind of be a part of it all, rather than just being on the outside looking in at you guys on stage having the best time. Well, I don't know who's having a better time, you or the people watching.
It's pretty close.
Yeah, I imagine. I imagine. So how can people best follow you, listen to your music, see the things that you do? And then if after this episode, they're Chris cut you off at this thing, I need to know more about this, or I just want to listen to you talk and not him, how do they get a hold of you?
I mean, the easiest way to follow what we're doing musically is all on social media stuff. Them Coulee Boys is the name of the band. Coulee. Always got to spell it because a lot of people don't know that word. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's us on Instagram, Facebook. We have a website with the same name, hopefully. And I mean, we're pretty available on social media. But if you really want to connect, just come to a show. We're definitely a band that loves to talk and hang out with people before and after shows, and that's the best way to get the connection.
Yeah, I think people don't understand. I've met some really successful professional people, skateboarding as an example. I met Paul Rodriguez one time. He's one of the bigger name skateboarders, P-Rod.
Yeah.
And at this Nike demo he was at, he was the one after the autograph signing that was going and talking to every kid and just making himself available, even though he was the most famous person. And it's this is why people like them, And the crazy part to me is a lot of these people, you don't necessarily know them well, but they may have spent 100 hours listening to your music. You know what I mean? And What, you're not gonna give them 2 minutes of your time?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
It's the easiest icebreaker.
It really
honestly.
is. Yeah.
And it's so evident a lot of times when someone has like been building up to this moment a little bit, and they're like, "Oh, I finally get to talk to him," and it can feel isolating sometimes, just like being a musician, because when there's that intimidation factor, and people won't want to say something because they're like, "Oh, I'm going to take up their time." And the way we think of it, it's just like these people have supported us and loved us, and it's the bare minimum to be able to be there for them and give them that time, because it just, I mean, like, it makes our life possible, and it makes what we do, just like that much more special.
Yeah. Well, and I interviewed Miles Hass a while back. He owns the biggest male strip show in the world. He's not what you would expect. He's hilarious and a really genuine, nice guy. It's called Magic Men Live, but he also does a podcast called the Stripped On Podcast, and he's a genius, and he's given me a lot of really good advice. And one of the things he said is, like, your top fans, those people, you really need to take care of them, because they're the ones who are going out and promoting you constantly that you don't even know. They're the ones that all the time are like, man, I can't believe you haven't heard Them Coulee Boys. They're the ones who go over to somebody's 4th of July party and they take over the mic, or they play the audio aux cord, put their phone on, and then play your music and then tell everybody about you. It's like, these people do so much for you. The least you can do is give them a few minutes of your time. Granted, like, not everyone always has an hour, and you have other priorities and you have other things to do, but like, the least you can do is that. So anyways, okay, before we get into that, where's Them Coulee Boys? I'm sure people have asked, but I still don't know. What's with the name?
So Coulee, first of all, is a regional term. It's like southwestern Wisconsin, and basically the origin of it, and I hope there's not some like language expert out there that's going to come correct me, because I've been telling this story for years. But Coulee is a name the French fur traders came up with when they came to Wisconsin to describe the valleys that they're encountering, that driftless region of Wisconsin. Okay. And it was a Native American term that was then kind of changed and made French. And it's a really cool term. And then how it came about for us was, we met at a summer camp, me and my banjo player Bo, and then my little brother Jens. We all were counselors at this camp, and we would always just get into stuff. It was a Bible camp, but the stuff we were doing was not necessarily.
Was it Camp Manitou or which one?
No, we were up at Luther Park in Chippewa, Wisconsin, small town Wisconsin. But we were always kind of getting into stuff, and it was fun. And our friend of ours kept going. Whenever we would be doing something we probably shouldn't be doing, he'd be like, "Hey, Them Coulee Boys are at it again." And it was just like this. He'd do it with an accent. He'd be like, "Them Coulee Boys are at it again," and it was just a joke.
Sure.
And when we finally became, when we started playing songs and started thinking about doing something, we're like, well, what are we going to call ourselves? And it was like, well, you should call yourselves Them Coulee Boys, kind of as a joke. Yeah. Thinking it would never get out of the basement. And here we are, like almost 10 years later, playing on big, huge stages with a name that like was a joke. Yeah. And it's kind of fun how it just kind of takes a life of its own and goes, and it's fun. We like it.
I think it works though, because it is kind of like obviously grammatically not even correct. Yeah. People are like, you ever listen to Them Coulee Boys? And you're like, what? What are you talking about? Yeah. Who are they? It gets the conversation started, and it's kind of like endearing, because it makes it seem, at least from my perspective, that you're not taking yourself so seriously, and I think people like that. And
I think it's like a nice juxtaposition too, because we do take ourselves very seriously when we make the music, we are so intentional with what we do. But, when you have a name like that, it kind of like pushes a little space. It makes it a little less intense. Yeah. And then, that's welcoming for people. And then they put on the headphones, they come to the shows, they listen to the songs, and then they're hit with something heavy, something sincere, something that means a lot. And they're like, I don't want to say you trick them.
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, like, it's part of like, it's just like getting people to sit at the table, and once they're there at the table, to be in the moment, and that's something powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I try to do that with the show too. I think people see me as like a skateboard shop owner who's covered in tattoos. Like, well, how serious is this going to be?
Right.
And then when people show up, or I go to them or whatever, and like I've researched this person, and I try to take this very professionally, and I do it like to the best of my possible abilities. I think a lot of times people are caught off guard a little bit, and they're like, "Oh, you do take this seriously? Like this is a real thing for you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, dude. I'm of the belief of like, if you're not going to do it to your best ability, just don't do it. You don't have to be the best, and you're not going to be the best, but you should be your best. Otherwise, what's the point? You're not going to progress." So getting back to it, where are you from originally? Are you from Eau Claire? Or are you from more Southwest then? Because I had never heard of the term Coulee.
Yeah, I'm a transplant. I've been in Eau Claire now for like the last 5-6 years, but I grew up like south of Eau Claire. Technically, Hixton, Wisconsin is the name of the town. It's
Which is like 2,000 people?
400 people.
Oh, even more. Okay.
They have, more antique shops than they do anything else in that
surprised
town.
It's not more bars.
Yeah.
There's like 3 bars,
equal.
a church. And then is that right off 94 if you're going towards like the Dells? And because I've driven past a million times.
Yep. And you can see the old schoolhouse, or like they had a whole school there that is now an antique shop. And it's just like, it's this small, wonderful, beautiful town. And I lived in the country out there, and that's kind of where I grew up in the country, grew up, very small town America, and went to school in Milwaukee, and that was big. And Eau Claire is where I've been settled now. It just feels like a happy medium between the two.
And Milwaukee was college you went to school. Okay, so how many people were in your graduating class in high school, to give a perspective?
Like 45, I think.
So you knew everyone.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay,
for
cool.
better or worse.
So naturally you wanted to get out of the area then.
Yeah. I think I wanted to shock the system a little bit. Just be like, hey, I got to get a different worldview here. I love small town Wisconsin, and I love, the intimacy of that. Yeah. But there's something beautiful about just like walking on a street and not knowing anybody. Yeah.
Well, and there's so much to it, right? Yeah. There's zero diversity in a lot of these small towns. And I'm not just talking about race, but among a lot of things, everybody is growing up with the exact same little perspective, and it's so small time. And there is that intimacy and that friendliness and that love in that community that like is really, really special, that I think people in a bigger city don't understand. Yeah. So there are really awesome things about it, but you have such a small perspective of the world that I think it's a great idea in general. Like I think my personal opinion is I think people shouldn't go to college immediately outside of high school. And in Europe, a lot of people, they take a gap year and they travel the world. And I think that's extremely valuable to find yourself, figure out what you want to do, get a perspective on what things are like in other areas. I'm not saying you got to take a gap year and travel the world, but getting out of the space that you grew up in, even if you end up wanting to come back like I did. Like my parents bought this house when I was 2 years old. I bought it for my dad when I got divorced. So I'm in the house I grew up in, which is like wild to me. But I grew up here from age 2 to 18. I lived in Eau Claire. And then like everybody, it's like, I got to go to bigger. So I went up to Duluth for college for a year. And then I went to Minneapolis area for a year and realized like, no, I still love Eau Claire. And I came back here. But I think you don't get those types of perspectives, and you can't even really enjoy and put a value on what you do have until you understand what it's like in other places. Those things you don't have in your community.
It's context.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So I think having those perspectives is super important. So as far as music goes, obviously, like if you're out in the middle of nowhere, it's not like there's like shows constantly that you just start going to. What was your kind of introduction to music?
I definitely think the internet really helped a lot with that.
How old are you?
I'm 30.
Okay, so yeah, we grew up but I mean, when we were young though, YouTube wasn't really a thing. Not when we were,
it was 10. Just starting, Right. I mean, like I mean, as far as like my introduction to music, that wasn't, like at school or at church or anything like that. My grandpa was listening to a lot of like classic country in this truck when we were driving around. Sure. My dad was listening to like a lot of classic rock. My mom was kind of like the soft acoustic, like Joni Mitchell, but then into like the Fleetwood Mac kind of stuff too. And, I think like my family was always been around music, but not necessarily as a focus. And then as a child, they put me in the piano lessons. They put me in something.
How young were you when you did that?
I was like third grade when I started.
Oh, so you were young getting into music. Okay.
Yeah. And like I've always like taken to it. And singing has always been something that's been a natural thing for me. I was doing all the solos in kindergarten and first grade and all those things. Okay. But like when it changed from just like something I did at school and something that I was obsessed with, I think it was kind of like that middle school, high school thing. I got a guitar from my cousin that I just was like, oh, this is something that I could pour energy into.
Like a little acoustic?
Yeah. And like that kind of blew my mind. And, you know, it being from such a small rural place, like you kind of have this limited, oh, this is what my friend listens to. This is what this is what my uncle listens to. You have this small scope of stuff, but you know, like that was the boom of like the blogs, the music blogs in that round time. And I kind of like hopped into that world and was like, oh, I'm going to listen to this band from New York. I'm going to listen to this kind of thing. And it was, that really opened up my perspective on like what was possible. You know, I just like, up until then, it was just like, this is what the radio does.
Right.
And I think, you know, being able to like access things that I wasn't going to hear on Top 40 was something that was really cool for me.
What were some of those blogs? Because I know like obviously forums like Reddit and stuff, people kind of find their own influencers in that kind of way, pre-influencer, but you know what I mean? Different types of influences. What were the things, what were these blogs or wherever that you got a lot of this information that had an impact on you?
The biggest one is this called Daytrotter. I don't know if you remember Daytrotter. No. Like Daytrotter would do these like, it eventually became like Paste and like other things like that. But Daytrotter was these like live sessions, and they would have bands come in, and
kind of like the Tiny Desk thing now?
Sorta, but there was no video.
Sure.
It was all audio, and they'd have these bands come in, and it's just so well curated with like cool bands. Like that was how I discovered Vampire Weekend. That was how I discovered.
So was it really indie, or was it
very indie?
Okay,
but like very wide-ranging indie. That's the first time I heard Mumford.
Okay,
you know, but there's like before those bands had really blew up. It was kind of like this little like session place in Iowa that these people would come through and record these sessions, and they had this person who made watercolor art for each one of the sessions, and it was so cool. And I was like, I just like remember like, oh, I got to check what band is making stuff that week, because they would put out a few a week, and it was just like, oh, it's this one, and I would learn so many bands from that. And we eventually like got to record a Daytrotter session.
Oh, cool!
And it's really, really fun, and it's kind of on the tail end of when they were doing it, and I was like selfishly really excited for the watercolor, you know, painting that they were going to do of us, because I was like, oh, I'm going to look pretty cool in this art style. And then they used a photo from like 4 years beforehand, so everybody looked different. We had our old bass player in it, and it was like it went for, I had this expectation of like, oh, this is really cool, we're gonna be a part of this history. And then like the session was awesome, and we had a good time, but that was definitely disappointing to see. Like, I have long hair, you know, and in the picture in that painting I had short hair, and I was like, oh, this is something I've wanted for so long, and here we are, just like, I can't show this off.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's kind of like, you know, they say never to meet your heroes for that same reason. You build stuff up in your mind to be something that's like very unrealistic, and then when you do it, you know, sometimes it's better not to do it in a way. But I'm sure it was cool. So the first instrument then was piano. You were singing already. When did, like, what was your first like performance then? Was Them Coulee Boys the only band you ever had? Were you in some kind of band before that?
So I did play in a band in high school. With a few of my buddies.
What was that called?
We were called The Vindicated Truth, which, you know, I mean, like,
you guys were the truth at that age. You for sure knew about it.
We knew everything at that age. And it was like me and we're 3 electric guitars, a couple of basses, like a guy played drums. It just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
But it was really, really fun.
Yeah, sure.
And, you know, I think that like was an experience for me. You know, we played 4 or 5 shows. You know, like the hustle of like, oh, I'm going to call this coffee shop 5 times until they finally let us play.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those that like I think was a precursor. I didn't know that I wanted to be in a band. But like that experience was so fun that like when I later in life found that I had some musical chemistry with somebody else, I was like, well, it's not so hard to get it started. You know, like having that experience in high school of that blind confidence of like, I can do this, I can make this work. And then having it fail, you know, to just be able to like, when I had another opportunity to start a band, it's like, well, it doesn't matter if it fails.
Right.
Like, I'm just doing something that is fun with people that I care about. And like, that's the basis of, you know, why we started the band and why it still continues.
Well, and that's how it has to be.
Yeah.
You know, if you went into something exclusively for it to be like, this is what's going to be a career and this is what's going to be money, if that was the motivating factor behind doing it, it's not going to work. Really, like anybody that's successful in these things, there is a trigger at some point that they hit that they go, okay, this is, I love what this is, but I want to take this really seriously. And that's when they kind of intentionally start going that direction. When was that moment for you that you had where you were like, okay, Them Coulee Boys, this is going to be like my career. I want to do music as a career, not just a fun thing.
Well, we started the band like my senior year of college.
Oh, so you were already kind of at that point.
But I was kind of like, you know, it was still something like, man, this is fun.
Yeah.
And I got to do this. And we played like a couple of years, like just like casually played maybe like 10, not even that, 5-10 shows a year.
Okay.
And it was just fun and we were having fun with it.
Was that in the Milwaukee area or up here? You moved up here?
We split time. You know, I mean, like that first year I was in Milwaukee. My brother was in Eau Claire. The other guy was in Menominee. Okay. You know, we just like made it work. But like a year and a half, 2 years into that, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Okay.
And, you know, I think and thank goodness she's been in remission now for like 6-7 years. But I think, you know, having someone that I cared so deeply about and loved so much, like having her mortality kind of staring me in the face, kind of put my mortality in perspective. I'm like, what am I doing with my life? What do I care about? You know, like life is short. What am I putting my energy towards? And it just like those, you know, conversations with my mom and those like moments of like discerning that this is what I really care about. This is what I'm passionate about. Like, this is what I want to do. And that's when it really became like, okay, I need to put energy to make this a career. I want this to be what I'm going to do. And thankfully, like success followed from that. But I don't think success was what was like, made me make that jump. We were not making money at that point. It just like, I think it was that internal thing in me saying, you got to do this or you're never going to do this.
It's, you know, it's part of just like maturing, and a lot of people have a trigger like that. And I can relate really deeply on that because I was working, I was an assistant manager at Verizon Wireless at the highest paying job I ever had when I was 22. That was my last job. And then kind of out of nowhere, my parents got divorced, like they split up.
Right.
And the week after they split up, my dad had a horrible heart attack and should have died. He was on a balloon pump for like 2 weeks.
Wow.
They were like, it was very surprising that he lived. And then shortly after, he ended up being flown to the Abbott Northwestern in Minneapolis and sat in the ICU there for 9 weeks waiting for a heart transplant. And I had a lot of like intense things happen. I had my first child during that time frame too, like all within, you know, a year or two. And it was the same thing. It was like looking at it and saying, well, you know, my parents were really financially stable. I thought that was like really important. And then, but where's that stability anyways? You know, right before they're about to retire and be able to travel the world and do whatever they want, really, this happens. Not only that, but then with the government too, you can feel one way or another about it. But Scott Walker came in as our governor and eliminated collective bargaining, which my parents both worked for the government. So all of a sudden their insurance was cut, like what their wages, everything, and everything they had been working towards and talking about for decades was just like gone. You know, and that really made me think about it too. And it's like, well, what if I died tomorrow? Like, would I feel good about what I'd spent my time doing? And then the answer was just no. I don't think I was greasy. I don't think it was bad, but I wasn't doing anything that I felt mattered. I wasn't helping the world. I was doing the opposite. I was helping a company that I think makes the world worse, generally speaking. So it was like, you know, what do I really want out of life then? And money's not what I wanted. You know, and it's those types of things that really give you the juice and make you like reflect and think and go, okay, well, I got to make a change. What is that change going to be? And then the second part of that is like what people need to understand is if you want to have the biggest impact that you possibly can, that means you need to be able to put all of your time and energy into it. In order to put all of your time and energy into it, it needs to be your income as well. So it's not money driven, but you have to make enough that you can do this full time. Because if you're splitting that, and this is 5-10 hours of your time versus like your regular job, you can only make so much. You can only have so big of an impact. But if you care about having a positive impact in the world through your music, or like how I'm on the Parks Commission with the city and trying to do that, or inspiring people through the show or whatever, you have to make enough money to pay your bills, so that way that is where all of your time goes into. And a lot of people, I don't think, spend that much time thinking about it. They're like, well, it's just your passion. It's like, yes, but if I want this to be what I want it to be, there has to be enough money to get there. And so we'll get to that point. It's time for our first song break. Them Coulee Boys, obviously, like you said, you've been going like 10 years now, so you've had a lot of hits. What's one song from you? And I listened to a bunch of them the other day, so I know which one that I like the most just from what I listened to. But what's a song of yours that we can play right now?
I would love if you could play the song called Phil's Song.
How do you spell that?
It's PHIL 'S song.
Perfect.
It's named after a buddy
Phil's
of mine.
song, okay.
Dearly beloved, we have gathered around this phone call. Can I put you on speakerphone? We just punched a hole in our wall. We've been sifting through the memories of the last we got to see that shit-eating ground. Would it be beautiful if I could see that smile once again? Damn, I still love you. Damn, man, you gotta know I still love you. Have you heard the one about the two kids swore that they get out to see the world, kiss those girls and make that noise they swore they heard? But you're not really from the area, old town hero, man for stardom. Damn it, man, you said what you said you do. Damn, man, you gotta know I still love you. Damn, man, you gotta know I still love you. It's time to laugh, time to cry. There's one for both at the same time. Sometimes that's what I feel when I think of you. Do we ever really die? Love is what we left behind. Sometimes that's what I feel when I think of you. Damn, man, you gotta know I still love you. Damn, man, you gotta know I still love you. Do we ever really die? If love is what we left behind, 'cause that is what I feel when I think of you. Damn, man, you gotta know I still love you. Damn, man, you gotta know I still love you.
Thank you so much for that song. Tell me the story behind it. Obviously, it means something. Who's Phil? What's the story behind that one?
Yeah, Phil was one of my best buddies growing up. Just a dude that I was always hanging around with at any opportunity from, kindergarten on kind of thing. And a couple of summers ago, Phil took his own life, and it was a shock to everyone that loved him. And, you know, I loved him very, very deeply. And he was a huge supporter of the band. He was a huge just advocate for me in general and just a great friend. And I wanted to make something that would like honor that. And, you know, I kept writing all these like really sad songs, and that's just not him at all. Like, he was one of those guys that just would like light up a room. It was just magnetic and just could be the life of any party that he was at. And I was like, we got to make something that feels like that. So that song is just like the celebration, you know, and that the line that repeats it is like, I still love you. And
Sure.
like, you know, it's a song that like, it's heavy, but like it's so joyful and fun that, you know, it's what I've talked about earlier, you know, like you kind of trick someone, you know, you invite them to the table with something that feels like that, but you talk about something a little more serious. And it's become just an opportunity every night to like remember and keep him here.
Sure.
And like, it's my favorite song that we've ever done. And it's my favorite song to play live. So I was like, if I have one song to put on this podcast, that's definitely the one that I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And it feels, any opportunity to play that song is always a joy.
You know, I think it's like the whole idea of a celebration of life versus like a funeral.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
they obviously they don't want everyone crying and whatever, you know, like they want to know that people love them, I'm sure. But like realistically, they want people to remember them in a positive way, and they want to make other people happy. And that's like shows just from their own, like how their attitude in life, right?
Yeah.
It tends to be, you look at people like Robin Williams and whatever.
Right.
We've all been in dark places, unfortunately, a lot more than I realized when I was younger. But like, it's usually people who are hurting the most that they can't make themselves happy. So they do anything they can to make other people happy.
Right.
You know, because that's all that they can do. So I think celebrating somebody in that kind of way is the most appropriate way. And that's what they would have wanted. And then everyone can have fun. Nobody wants to sit around and like be in a bad mood, you know?
Yeah.
Like we want to uplift people. And yes, like there's certain things that you can't talk about in an uplifting way. Certainly there are subjects like that. But generally speaking, most things, if we look at the positive, like the world's hard enough without like us dwelling on negative. So for how you guys write a song, and I want to get back to something else, you know, after that, but what's the process like? So like for that song, you kind of explained a little bit what the process is, but there's multiple instruments involved. There's obviously a lot going on. What is the process like? Is it you write lyrics first? Is it you sit with your guitar and kind of play a little thing first? Is it somebody else in the band playing the banjo that comes first? Is it a different thing? What's the process like for how a song comes together?
That song came together a little differently than other ones. You know, it started with my friend Bo, our banjo player, who's also a friend of Phil's. Like, he came to me with some bare bones of a song, and I turned it into something else. And that sometimes it works like that. But, you know, my general process when it comes to putting a song together, it's got to start with something that, like, hooks me. It's got to start with, if it's a riff on the guitar, if it's a lyric, it has to be something that's going to like stick in my brain for a long time. Something that like gives me a little stirring in my gut that says, you got to chase this thread. If I don't have that to start, it doesn't go anywhere. But once I have something like that, you know, I'll kind of ruminate on it. I'll like spend a few days adding to it. Like, where's this riff going to go? Where is this line going to go? Where is this story going to like progress to? And, once I have something like that, I'll kind of like, I'm going to get the chords, I'm going to get the melody, I'm going to get the lyrics, and I kind of get this like skeleton of a song. It's just me, usually with a guitar and my voice playing into my voice memos thing on my phone.
Yeah.
And once I have that, then I show it to the band, and then that's where it fleshes out and becomes a real song. You know, I'm a firm believer in just like, I have these like little babies of songs, and then I give them to the guys, and they put their artistry on it, and they like make it into what it should be.
Yeah.
I have like ideas and I have
Sure.
directions, but I think the beauty of like being a band as opposed to a solo artist is you give up some of that agency of your own creation and just like let other people put their parts into it. And it's a beautiful thing. Sometimes it starts one way and ends another, and I really like, that's what this band exists on, is like the freedom to put your own thing in it.
Yeah, and I think all the other members of a band never get the recognition that they deserve.
Right.
You know, it's always the front man. It's whoever's singing. That's who gets all the attention. A lot of bands, it's that person's name is the band. And it's like, that person probably does, yes, they're the front and they're who the cameras are on. And I'm not saying their role isn't important. It certainly is. However, a lot of times people are placing way more importance on that. Yeah. Like there's a lot of bands out there that you could swap the singer out and like it would still be a really dope band. Yeah. You know, but there's a lot of bands out there where if you lost the guitarist / songwriter or what, you know, one person from that band, it's gone, you know, and that person isn't the one that's recognized.
It's symbiotic, you know, I mean, like we all work together, you know, like if it was just me making music, I would be some dude sitting in a coffee shop, like playing acoustic songs, and I love it. Yeah. But like, you know, these guys push me in directions that I'm sometimes not comfortable with, and it makes music that has, you know, worked really well for us and has been something that like we love to play every night.
So it's just bigger than you. Yeah. You're making stuff that you couldn't do on your own, that has an impact on people that you can't have an impact on without them. It's just, it grows it to be a much bigger thing. It's like me, people ask like, why don't you do episodes where you're just talking, like a lot of podcasts do? I'm like, dude, my story can only inspire so many people. There's only so many people that want to listen to it. Plus, because I talk a lot on my own episodes with other people. Like I like to share a lot of stories and have a conversation. People hear my story a lot. They don't want to hear it again. Yeah. Like I don't think they do. But through the lens of other people's stories, that's how we can really do a lot. So it's my show, but it's not me who really is inspiring people. I don't think it's the other people that I'm bringing together. I'm a catalyst for it, but it's not just me. It takes everyone. So can you list everybody that's in the band? And then how about this? Tell me who's in the band, what instrument they play or what role they have in the band. And then what's a fun fact, not music related, about them?
Ooh, okay. Well, I'll kind of go in order of how they came to the band, because that's kind of the beauty of this band. We started one way, became another thing. My banjo player, his name is Bo Janke. Like I said, he plays the banjo, but he also brings electric banjo to that, and he'll play keys, he'll play organs. He's kind of like, he'll do anything kind of thing. And Bo, I'm trying to think of outside of, he's an artist. He's like a printmaker. He does all of our art. He does woodblock prints. Oh, cool. Yeah, so he's carving the wood blocks, running it through the press, and it's so old-fashioned, so kind of a throwback kind of method of doing it. And he does that. That's another. I'll promote his business if I'm going to do it. Yeah. It's called Bibbs Woodcut Prints, and it's him and his wife Erin, and they're incredible.
That kind of art it's very obvious that it's made that way, and hardly anybody wants to put in the energy and time that goes into creating that kind of art. So when you see it, you recognize what goes into it, and it's like really special. I really appreciate that kind of art too.
Oh yeah, and he's incredible.
Yeah, I'll check it out for sure.
Yeah, Bo. So moving on then I have my little brother Jens Staff. Jens plays the mandolin. He also plays an electric version of the mandolin, as well as keys and other thing. The cool thing about Bo and Jens is, as we've progressed as a band, like we've wanted different sounds, and those two guys are kind of our jack of all trades. They're going to do different things, whatever the song calls for. And outside of, the band, besides being my brother, Jens is really passionate about, like, he likes to golf. He likes to be outside. He's like the most caring person that I've ever met. I've always maintained that of the two Staff brothers, he's the catch. He's the one. He's the one that, he's the kindest, and he's just this gigantic teddy bear, and anyone that knows him loves him. And
the better looking.
Yeah, of course. You've seen that beard. You got to look at his beard. It's incredible. But yeah, so that's Jensen. That was kind of like the original three. And we had a former member, Mike, who was like rounded us out to become four. And then Mike was replaced by our current bass player, Neil. And Neil plays bass, and he used to do a little stand up. Now he plays more electric. And Neil is just what he's become passionate about lately. He's always been a big, he loves media, and he loves like TV shows, and he loves like games and all kinds of things like that. But what he's become passionate about lately is like he's moved and kind of been our video guy.
Oh, cool.
So he's spent a lot of time making music videos for us. He's spent a lot of time making, you know, like promotional kind of things. He's spent a lot of time making like weird TikTok things, which I am not the biggest like TikTok guy, but when it's an opportunity for my friend Neil to be a weirdo, like I'm going to encourage it because he's the best kind of weird. And I love Neil. So that was 4 for us. And then finally, like we eventually added a drummer, and the drummer we have now, who's been with us for the last few years, his name is Stash Hobley. And Stash is, outside of just being like a killer drummer, he's so passionate about like things that are a little different than the rest of the band. He loves food. He loves cooking. And he loves a lot of things that require more attention to detail and meticulousness than like a lot of what the rest of us are. And we have a lot of huge personalities in the band. I think that's just kind of something that sells people on us sometimes, but Stash is definitely like this like calming presence that kind of like, you need that with your drummer. You know, you have to have that bass to like build everything else up from, and like both like musically and, you know, personally, he's just that presence in the band.
Yeah, those are super important. Plus it's like the easiest to work with in some ways and the hardest in other ways, because you know, like their expectations, regardless of it they'll tell you them, are high. So it's like really hard to like bring up to that, but you can expect that they're gonna do, you know what I mean? They're more doers than talkers, and like that I have a lot of value in. A lot of people just they like to talk more than they like to do, and that's like, yeah, that's an issue in itself. So it's nice when people are actually doing it. So what are some of your, like the band has grown, you got 5 people, you guys are killing it, everything's going great, but this has been a long journey. What are some of the major milestones that you've hit that, like when I'm asking you right now, come to memory, whether it's like biggest shows that you went to or whatever, or I know you guys placed in like the best local band or something in the volume 1. Like what are some milestones you've hit that you're really excited about?
You know, we're not necessarily a band that looks at that stuff a lot of times. You know, it's always fun and it's always good to put on your like press kit to get booked places. But you know, like we're concerned with where we're playing and who we're playing for. So a lot of like things that we're really proud of are like, oh, you know, this is the first time we played this kind of festival. You know, Blue Ox, you know, why we're here today, you know, like Blue Ox gave us a shot in playing their festival when we were barely a band. And
so that was your first festival?
Yeah, I mean, we played other smaller festivals, but of that size, that was the first one. And you know, within like 2 years, we were playing the main stage, and now we're playing the main stage at night, kind of thing. And it's like those are something we look back on and are proud of. You know, we went on big tours. We opened for Trampled by Turtles. You know, we went on a couple of runs with them at these big theaters, playing for, you know, 3,000-4,000 people sometimes. You know, those are the things we kind of look back at, and you're like, those are the milestone things. We've had really fun like awards, you know, like Volume 1 has been very kind to us with their readers poll, you know, like we've won Best Band and Best Bluegrass Band a bunch of times. But, you know, we've also been fortunate enough, like we won a Whammy last year, which is a Wisconsin area music industry. Like we were the best. They named us Best Americana Band, Bluegrass Americana Band. And that's something that, like, you know, we don't really like shoot for that. But when you're recognized, like it always feels good. Yeah. You know, I mean, like we had like a Milwaukee Journal Sentinel bands to watch, and like sometimes that's just promo, and sometimes that's just like posturing. But when it comes down to it, that's someone who cares about your music and someone who like has listened deeply, and that's all we really want is to people to like, you know, listen deeply to what we're trying to say and let it move them, let it affect them, let it change them. And like those awards are just a result of people doing that. Yeah. I mean, it's never like the point, right, to get out there and get that kind of recognition or whatever, but it does really feel good when you put in so much work towards something, and you've put so much of your time, energy, your livelihood, your life into something,
when you do get public recognition, it's like, oh, okay, you guys get it.
Yeah, right.
I've been working, and I'm glad that you get it.
I'm not crazy here.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of those times, those milestones, you know, I talk about it on the show a lot with imposter syndrome. I'm sure you're very familiar, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of us happen, for people who don't know what imposter syndrome is, it's when you're doing something that other people recognize that you're good at or you're established at or whatever, but you don't think you belong there yet, you know? And it happens to a lot of us. Was there ever a point that you were having imposter syndrome, but it came and all of a sudden you kind of had that click of like, no, I do belong here, as like perhaps Blue Ox or something like that?
Actually, I think it was like in the recording studio.
Okay.
You know, I think, you know, we had made our first EP we made in my buddy's living room with his dogs barking every time that we got too loud. We made a record after that by ourselves at this old farmhouse with one mic. You know, like, and then after that, we're like, hey, we're going to get to a studio. And then the record after that, we moved to a studio that, had all this history. Like we recorded at this place called Pachyderm Studios up in Cannon Falls, Minnesota. And they most famously like recorded, Nirvana's In Utero there. And I think we were there 25 years to the month that they were there making that record. And, you know, it's weird to kind of like look at that and like say that's when it felt more like, hey, I belong. Right. But, you know, you're in this space, you're learning about the history of the space, and it kind of lends some credibility to what you're doing.
Right.
You know, like up until that point, it's like, it always kind of felt like we're lucky to be here. We're lucky to get out of the basement, as I like to say, you know, like we're lucky to play for people. But when we were at that point, it was like, hey, you know, we've worked really hard. And we've like gained this following, we gained this support to be able to go to a place like this and work on this with the people we're working on. We worked on, our producer for that record was Dave Simonette from Trampled by Turtles. And, you know, that's happened with the record after that. We worked with Brian Joseph here in Eau Claire, who's won a Grammy. And those kind of things is, you know, like if you had said 7-8 years ago that I would work with those people, I wouldn't believe you.
Right.
And I think the imposter syndrome is always still there. Like, sure. I'm always kind of like, do I deserve this? So it kind of just makes me work harder as a result. But those moments are definitely, you look back and you're like, hey, we've worked really hard. We're here for a reason. And I think that's always feels good. Yeah,
I think those milestones are important because that's what makes you recognize it, where you're like, okay, so I should keep going at this. This isn't a waste of everybody's time. It's not a waste of my time. What I'm doing matters. And it's not just in my head, you know, those things matter. Blue Ox. So that's kind of like what inspired this conversation. Granted, like we've talked and we've kicked it at the bar and like obviously we wanted to do this conversation at some point anyways, but the trigger was because I'm going to be doing a bunch of talk content for Blue Ox, featuring a bunch of their artists. And it's going to be a really cool thing, I think, for both parties, you know, for me to be able to like do a festival is something special for me. I've been wanting to do. For Blue Ox to be able to have like professional talk content with a bunch of their people, I think is going to be pretty special too. So that kind of inspired this. But Blue Ox, you said, kind of held a special place for you. Can you describe what Blue Ox is like and what makes Blue Ox special?
Why I love Blue Ox is like when someone asks me this question, it's always like there's no expectation with Blue Ox with what you need to be or what you need to do. You can go there and be yourself, and I think that is so freeing. You know, there's some festivals that like, I mean, we see it with the things like Coachella and other things. Like people go there to be seen. People go there to, you know, like it's this status symbol. And like Blue Ox and like bluegrass festivals in general are kind of, that's not the vibe. You know, it's like go there, do your thing, be what you want to be. And that is something that's not unique to Blue Ox, but I think just the fact that it's, you know, bluegrass festivals in general have that vibe, but Blue Ox has the professionalism to like support that without it being kind of this crazy all over the place thing. If you want to go to Blue Ox and have a wholesome family time with your kids blowing bubbles in the field, you can do that. and have that time. If you want to go to Blue Ox and party out in the woods till 4 or 5 in the morning, you could totally do that too. I think like the versatility of, you know, there's something there for everybody, and there's no expectation either way for what you choose to do. And I just love it. It's like the music is world class, and like as an artist, you feel that from the audience too. They realize that they're in that space of something special, and it's so easy for an artist to like try to match the energy and give it back.
Yeah, well, I mean, so a couple things to that, but like bluegrass music is really, really welcoming, and the people that are in it is kind of an overwhelmingly positive, but like relaxing and not like people, don't get me wrong, the musicians take their craft seriously, of course, but the music isn't like overly serious and egotistical. So you don't really get that problem. You know, when you're at the festival, you're not running into people that are like, you know, look at what I'm wearing and look at who I'm with. Like, it just isn't like that when you're at that festival. Everybody wants to give you a hug and ask how you're doing. It's like an extremely like positive, welcoming space. And like I said, I had never been to festival before, so I'm really excited to be able to go back and hang out for the whole weekend and like contribute to making that like thing as cool as it is. So the fact that we have that in this area, you know, for people that listen to this that aren't from the area, Eau Claire is a town of 69,000 people. It's not that big.
Yeah.
So for us to have the kind of people that are flying in to do this is really, really special. So props to the people that throw this event every year. That's for sure. Like I said, I'm really excited about it. You kind of alluded a little bit before how music's not going to be the same if you do it on your own, but I know you have been doing a little bit on your own, right?
Yeah, here and there.
So what's the story with that? Because you played at Stone's Throw for something. Are you planning on doing more solo stuff? Or like what's up with that section of it?
You know, I actually this winter was kicking around the idea of making a solo record. And it's more just the fact that I have a lot of songs, and I have songs that definitely don't fit what Coulee Boys are trying to do. And like, there's a freedom in being able to like not have to, and I don't want to say live up to expectations, but just to make something different. Yeah. And the one thing with this band is we are trying to, you know, like always push our boundaries and make something different, but there's freedom in doing something solo. And that didn't necessarily happen this year. But I've always used solo shows, and specifically I would go to open mic at the Plus here in Eau Claire every Tuesday. Yeah. Like for so many years. And you know, like it's the people that run that open mic are starting something up, and it's going to be at the Lakely downtown now.
Cullen, yeah.
Cullen. And you know, like that is something that's always been like just like a resource for me, like to be able to go every week and play songs that nobody has heard before, to test songs out, to be like, oh yeah, that third verse sucked. Let's change something there. That didn't hit the way I wanted it to. Just having a space to go up and have no expectations, to go up and be able to fail. Like, that's always been important to me. And that's more where I think the need for me to do solo stuff is. It's just like, I want to have a space where I can't lean on these dudes. Yeah. And just like let the song stand on its own. Let my performance stand on its own, and I think that just makes me a better songwriter.
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to have personal branding and everything, right? So Them Coulee Boys has a personal branding and a story and an expectation behind everything that you guys create. So I don't want to put anything in a box, but there is, we'll say, a bubble that can stretch and move rather than a box, but there is still a space that it fits within. But that doesn't mean that's the only thing you can do, right? So for people, you know, think about me. For a long time, it was like, you own the skateboard shop, you do skateboarding stuff. Right. I don't only do that, right? So I want to be able to do other things. Do I like make content related to scuba diving? No, but I do scuba dive, right? So it's like with the show, I've been able to kind of transition now into doing two things, you know, which I talked to you about off mic before, where I do 10 episode seasons of the regular show. Yeah. I'm trying to really like make the group of guests very diverse from different areas and not central at Eau Claire a whole lot, because I don't want it to be boxed into that. But I still really want to feature a bunch of local people. Yeah. I just think if I did all local people, it wouldn't be really the direction that I want things to go and would limit things. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't do it. So now through Converge Radio, I'm on every Wednesday and Sunday. So Wednesdays are dedicated just to local people. And that's like kind of the perfect outlet where I don't have to promote it quite in the same kind of way. It doesn't have to be part of the story of who can we expect to see on season 10 or in season whatever, you know, but I can still give people, like local people, a space to speak on a professional kind of level on the radio and promote them and do a lot of cool things without it having to fit that story. It puts less pressure on it for me. So it's like if I interviewed 10 local musicians, it doesn't weigh my season as just local musicians, but I can still put those out. You know, it's kind of perfect for that type of a thing. So getting towards the end of the show, I always ask a few of the same questions, and I had sent you a couple of them before. When you do things that you're passionate about, it's really not like the financial gains that make you excited, that are memorable to you. It's other things. So I always ask every guest, can you share a story, something specific of a unique experience that you're really grateful for, but it only happened because you chose to pursue music?
Yeah. The thing that came to mind when you asked that question, it's kind of like a series of moments, it feels like. You know, every night we have a section of our show where we sing songs that kind of had to do with mental health. You know, that's something that that's something that I've had to navigate in my life, and other people in the band have had to navigate, and something that's important and we want to talk about. So every night we have this platform. So I use that platform and I talk about it on stage. I, you know, talk about, you know, the power of, you know, just making it more normal to talk about. And I do that every night. And then we play these songs that go with each other. You know, one's about my experience with the anxiety, and then it goes into Phil's song, what we played earlier, you know, my experience with my friend who, you know, like lost his life to depression. And, you know, like those are heavy, big moments.
Right.
And we have been on stages in front of 3,000-4,000 people. And these are the moments I kind of thought about, like this would never happen if I wasn't in a band, that I got to talk about something that I cared about, something that I was passionate about, and then had 3,000-4,000 people completely silent listening to the song that came afterwards. And then 3 minutes later, dancing their butts off.
Yeah.
It's that, you know, moment of, you know, like having that many people in the palm of your hand and having them affected about something that you care so deeply about. There's like, it feels almost vain to be like, oh, I have that power. And I think like seeking that power out is vain and it feels weird, but like it's when we get to have that moment every night, it's not about me, it's not about us, it just becomes more about like this family of people that's there that night. And that feeling is something that I chase always. And it's just, those moments never would have existed if I wasn't in a band, and I get to have those moments like every night.
Yeah.
And that like, you know, I am so thankful for the opportunity to be able to have that kind of influence, you know, in a positive influence at that.
Yeah. I mean, if you were going out with the intention of, I just want to have 3,000 people listen to me, very different than recognizing that, well, I do currently have this many people listening to me. What can I do with it? What can I do with this power in this moment? Mm-hmm. And I do think mental health is something that needs to be normalized talking about. Yeah. I talk about it on the show quite a bit myself too, because I've dealt with a lot of things, especially in the last few years, and especially around males in particular. Like, we don't want to talk about our feelings, and we're just expected not to. So I think when you're on a stage like that, people are looking to you, you know, you have their full attention, and for you to be able to talk about something like that, those are memorable things for them too. Like those have an actual effect on them, and you'll never know how many people, how many lives you potentially saved, you know, in moments like that, you know? But yeah, those types of things are why, you know, I had one happen to me, not on the powerful level of speaking to 3,000 people about it, but I had a girl come in, I don't know how old she is, so I shouldn't say girl, an adult woman come into my store, and She wasn't even living in the area, I don't think. And she kind of knew who I was. I didn't really recognize her, through Instagram or whatever. And she wanted to show, I believe it was her boyfriend, my store, because she really liked the show and she loved the shop. Right. She had been there in the past at some point. And she started talking to me about the show, about how she's really been listening for quite a while and it's had a really strong impact on her. And I was like, oh, cool. Like that's awesome to hear. That's why I make the show. And she had been working in some laboratory, working on something. She went to school with the intent of like wanting to help people, you know, but what she was doing was very commercial and not what she wanted. And didn't feel like she had an impact. And she told me that my show was the catalyst for why she walked away from that job and she started illustrating children's books. Yeah. And that was like,
right? Yeah.
Wow.
It's insane.
Like that's so crazy. I could have had an impact on somebody in that kind of way. So that's what like really drives me to continue to do the show is I know that there's people like that out there. I don't know how many of them. That's part of why I want to grow the show, is not like the egotistical, I want everyone to know who I am, but I do want to spread the message as much as possible because I do think that it helps people. And then those people help people. And it's, you know what I mean? It's just that snowball effect. On the flip side of it, and I always keep the show really positive, but when you make mistakes, that's when you learn the most typically. And then you can, as you make those mistakes, now you don't make them in the future. And that's what really helps you grow. So what's the story of a mistake that you made that taught you something valuable somebody listening might benefit from?
I think what came to mind for me is, the hard part about making art sometimes is like when you separate what's your personal life and what's art. And if you mix them sometimes, like you don't know how people that you care about are going to react to it. And I've always like drawn from my own experience a lot of times, be it in characters that I'm writing about or just like, I'm writing about a situation that happened to me. And I always like kind of thought, I have to mine these like situations. If this was hard for me, if this was something that, like affected me greatly, I gotta go there. I gotta like be in that moment and I gotta make something out of it. And I found that like, while that might make good art, like it's not necessarily the most healthy thing.
Sure.
And like, I feel like if I could, some of those situations had brought uncomfortable, relationships with people that I care deeply about. And, I think like if I was going to give advice to somebody, about, like doing, like mining from your own personal experience, just talk. I mean, like it's not just your story. And I think like the more that I've centered like the people that I'm trying to write about in what I'm trying to do, like the better results I've had, not only with just like the art in general, but, like with the people that the art is about. Right. Like you shouldn't sacrifice, relationships or people that you care for just to make a good song.
Yeah.
It's like, it's hard to go through life like that.
Yeah.
And, I think that is something that I've had to learn. And like, I definitely like would have loved to hear that advice,
Yeah, I mean, taking yourself out of your own shoes and looking at the situation from afar and then saying, well, if I'm going to write this song about this person, or if I'm going to bring up this story, like, I've brought stories up on my show. Yeah. If that person heard this, how would they feel about it? Yeah. If they wouldn't feel good about it, or you're wondering how they would feel about it, it might be worth having a conversation before you publicly put that out there, because you don't want to ruin relationships. Yeah. And I think it's just about being more mindful, in general about what you do. Like you said, being intentional earlier about what you do rather than just kind of putting things out there. And one of the pieces of advice I tell people is, if you can, once a day, take 10 minutes to just turn everything off and just spend it reflecting and thinking, and really like processing what is happening right now in your life, what things you've been working on, where you want things to go. Because a lot of times you just get carried away. It's not really it's not on purpose that these things happen. And it's not usually out of like coming from a negative space, but it's not intentional. And then mistakes happen and they can have serious consequences. So yeah, I think just being intentional and reflecting and thinking before you make decisions decisions that could potentially affect other people is
Right.
super important. And that affects like your whole career and everything on top of
Yeah,
it too, you
yeah.
know, like the other members of your band or something, you
Right.
know, or the relationships you have with the people who organize events. Like there's all of these things have consequences. And if you can pull yourself out of just yourself and try to consider how they would feel about this situation, it's going to make all your relationships flourish way better anyways.
Yeah. I never want to like censor myself, or I never want to like be not sincere.
Right.
But I think just like being able to lend some context to that, you know, like that it's
there's a
not just
tactful way to do it.
Yeah. You know, I like, especially that I've moved more into telling other people's stories than my stories. It's just like, hey, this is someone's life. And like, I've become very aware of that. And like, I think, you know, like it's something that has been a good thing for me to think about. If I was going to tell somebody else, like, yeah, just be aware of that, because it's art can be beautiful, but it doesn't have to be hurtful.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, having tact is super important.
Yeah.
Coming towards the end of the episode, now that people have heard this and they heard the song earlier and they're going to go listen to a whole bunch of things, they're going to buy Blue Ox tickets and they're going to be there with us, like partying it up, which is going to be tight. Once again, how can people best follow you, listen to your music, get in contact with you? And then really important question is, how can they best support you moving forward? Is it sharing music, you know, adding things to playlists? Is it sharing Instagram or social media stuff? Like, how can they support you best?
You know, as far as like finding us, same thing, Them Coulee Boys. If you Google it, it's going to come up with all those social media platforms.
And it's Coulee.
Yep. Them Coulee Boys. And yeah, I mean, those will be the easiest way to find us. And if you want to support us, you know, like we'll take it any way we can get it, you know, put us on a playlist. That's cool. You know, like talk about us on social media. That's great. You know, the most immediate way is just buy some merch, come to a show. It's a lot more fun to come to a show. If you're going to spend money on us, just come to a show, hang out, and like experience what it's all about. You know, for me, it's hard for me to be like, buy our music, buy our merch. Like those are things that it's physical goods, they're commodities, but you know, you're going to get your money's worth coming to a show. You're going, like that experience can almost become a priceless thing. So if you're going to put support, that's the best way to do it. And I know it's hard because we don't, as much as we love to travel the world, we're trying to get out as much as we can. But you know, that is definitely like the best way to support us. Just come to a show.
Yeah. I mean, it's important. You know, you vote with your dollar on things in America, and so your dollar does matter, whether it's ticket sales or anything else. Like, you don't want to put so much weight on a dollar, but it really does make a big difference. And, you know, people are spending the money regardless. Just, you know, be intentional with how you spend your money. And I'm not saying that you have to agree that the show that I create is worth money, that this conversation is valuable.
Right.
But if you do feel that it's valuable, then, you know, those things are extremely helpful. And I'm able to create a lot more if I had more of that. Like right now, right after this conversation, I had an interview before this, do this interview. Now I have to go to my store right after this and have a couple meetings. And it's like, I'm doing more than I realistically can do sustainably because I don't have enough money coming through the show. So it's not like I'm trying to sit here and beg, but if you do feel that there's value, it's important to be intentional with how you spend your money on things. So for me, you can go to passionpod.org and order merchandise there. Passion Board Shop's my skateboard shop. You can obviously go there, get whatever. Social media, it's just at Passion Pod. Everywhere you look, like, you'll be able to find it. So sharing that stuff is really important. And I think one of the best possible things you can do is wear a piece of merch. You're buying t-shirts anyways. Why buy one from somebody that doesn't even care that you bought it? Versus if you bought a Them Coulee Boys shirt and you wear it around, everyone's going to ask you about that. They're all going to see it. You're doing so much advertising for your friend or somebody that you would love to see succeed. You're helping them so much. And you don't even have to think about it. You just throw it on because you like the shirt and you're just wearing it. You know what I mean? So things like that, you know, help a lot. Or like stickers on your bumper of a car. Like all those types of things are super easy to do to support your friends that are making these things. And I think they're really important. Well, anyways, thank you, Gan, so much for coming on the show. Thanks for coming to my house. I got to get to my shop here shortly.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.